I woke up that morning believing it would be one of the proudest days of my life. I had spent years raising a boy who wasn't mine by blood, but had become mine through every sacrifice, every late-night conversation, every scraped knee and heartbreak. I thought his wedding would be a moment where all those years quietly folded into a single seat among family. I dressed early, choosing something elegant but modest, something that said I knew my place yet hoped to be seen. My husband barely looked at me as we drove. He had been distant for months, distracted by endless calls related to the wedding, many of them involving his ex-wife. I told myself not to think too much of it. It was their son's big day, after all. When we arrived at the venue, everything felt off. People greeted my husband with warmth, but when their eyes shifted to me, their smiles tightened. The wedding planner avoided my gaze, flipping through her clipboard with a practiced briskness. She guided me down the hallway, her voice light but hurried, and pointed to a lone chair placed outside the main hall. For a moment I thought she was joking, or that she would correct herself. But she didn't. She simply nodded politely and walked away before I could speak. I stood there, staring at that chair like it was a punishment designed especially for me. Music floated from inside the hall. Laughter. Camera flashes. The sound of people taking their seats I thought I belonged to. My husband had already been ushered inside. I saw him through the crack of the door, sitting comfortably with the groom's family, chatting as if nothing was missing beside him. I waited for him to notice me, to look around, to realize I wasn't beside him. He never did. A member of the bride's family walked past me, whispering loudly enough for me to hear. "Why is she even here?" I pretended not to hear, but my chest tightened. I sat in that hallway seat for a full minute before standing again, realizing I couldn't do it. I couldn't sit outside like a stranger while my stepson, the boy I helped raise, said vows inside a room where I wasn't welcome. I walked out of the venue, every step heavy with disbelief. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You don't deserve that." I froze. Another message came, as if the sender was watching me. "You should leave. They were never going to include you." My stomach twisted. I didn't know who it was, but somehow their words landed exactly where my fears lived. I kept walking toward the parking lot, trying to steady my breath. Everything inside me felt scraped raw, years of effort, erased in a single decision to place me in a hallway. As I reached my car, one more message arrived. "You were pushed aside on purpose." I didn't know who or why, but I knew this: I wasn't going back in there. And whatever was happening behind those walls was only the beginning of a truth I had ignored for far too long. I sat in my car, hands shaking around the steering wheel, staring at the 3 messages from the unknown number. I didn't reply. I didn't even know what to say. The wedding music was faint in the distance, echoing like a reminder of everything I wasn't allowed to be part of. I drove away slowly, not with anger but with a heaviness I couldn't hide from anymore. I didn't go home. I couldn't face the silent house filled with memories of a family I thought I belonged to. Instead, I stopped at a small cafe 2 streets away. A place empty enough to let me breathe. I slid into a corner booth, ordered nothing, and simply sat. The first thing that hit me wasn't anger. It was clarity. All the small changes in my marriage suddenly lined up. The late-night calls labeled wedding planning, the unnecessary meetings with his ex-wife, the way he had grown impatient with me, his sudden desire to keep the peace at any cost. Peace for whom? Certainly not for me. Every disappointment I had ignored over the past few months felt sharper now. I could no longer pretend they were harmless. My phone buzzed again. Another message. "You handled it with dignity." I typed back. "Who is this?" The reply came instantly. "Someone who saw what they did to you." That was all. No name, no explanation. I told them I didn't understand. They sent a photo. A picture of my hallway seat taken from inside the hall entrance. Whoever this person was, they had been close enough to see everything. After a long pause, the person finally revealed themselves. She said she was a part-time staff member at the venue, assigned to assist the coordinator. She had watched the argument earlier that morning between members of the bride's family and the wedding team. She told me the limited seating excuse was a lie. I had been intentionally removed from the family seating arrangement to avoid discomfort for the groom's biological mother. Words that felt like a slap even in text. But what froze me was when she added, "Your husband didn't oppose it. He agreed to it." My throat tightened. He agreed to have me placed in a hallway on his son's wedding day? The woman said she overheard the conversation while carrying floral arrangements. She even warned the coordinator that it seemed cruel. The coordinator shrugged and said, "It's what the family wants." The woman typed another message. "He had a chance to speak for you, but he didn't." The cafe walls seemed to close in around me. I gripped the phone, reading those lines again and again, hoping they would change. But they didn't. I felt something crack inside me. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, the way something breaks after being strained for too long. Before I could collect myself, another message arrived, this one more devastating than the rest. It was a picture. My husband and his ex-wife standing behind the venue near the service entrance, his hand resting on hers in a way that was far too familiar for people who claimed to have moved on. They weren't hugging. They weren't kissing. But the intimacy was unmistakable. The kind of closeness no one drifts into by accident. I stared at that image until my eyes burned. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Instead, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The kind that comes when a truth you've been avoiding finally sits in front of you. I typed one final message to the woman. "Thank you." Then I put my phone down, leaned back and whispered to myself, "I'm not going home. Not today. Not like this." Whatever was unfolding around me had only just begun, and for the first time in a long time I wasn't going to look away. I left the cafe only when the sun had shifted enough to remind me hours had passed without my noticing. The messages, the photo, the cruel seating arrangement, they all kept circling my mind like pieces of a puzzle I had been refusing to assemble. I didn't want to rely on messages from someone I barely knew, so I decided I needed to see the truth myself, without filters, without assumptions, without hoping for explanations that would never come. I drove back toward the venue but stopped far enough from the main entrance to avoid being noticed. My pulse was steady, almost unnervingly calm, as if my body had accepted something my heart hadn't yet processed from the side pathway. I saw guests leaving the hall for the reception. Their laughter floated through the air, completely detached from the quiet storm building inside me. I stayed hidden, watching with more distance than pain. The world kept moving, unaware of the shift happening in mine. Then I saw him, my husband, standing near the corner of the building with the same woman from the photo. His ex-wife. They weren't touching this time, but the closeness was still there. The familiar leaning in, the lowered voices, the shared smile that spoke of comfort and memories I had never been part of. It wasn't romantic affection between them that hurt me the most, it was the secrecy. The willingness to let me be humiliated while he stayed comfortably inside. Unbothered, entertained, respected. That I stepped back instinctively, not wanting them to notice me. That was when someone called my name softly. I turned to see one of my stepson's friends, someone who had known me for years. His face fell the moment he recognized me. "Why are you out here?" he asked. "Everyone thought you were sitting with the family." I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. I told him the truth, where they had placed me, how they directed me to the hallway like I was an inconvenience. His shock was genuine. He told me my stepson had insisted that I be seated near him, close enough to see his expressions during the vows. That was his request, and he thought it had been fulfilled. Hearing that stung more than anything. My stepson had not done this to me. He had trusted the adults in charge, assuming they would treat me with basic respect. The friend hesitated, then revealed something heavier. He had overheard a conversation between the groom's mother and her sister earlier that morning, before the ceremony. They had been discussing how reclaiming the family image would be easier if I wasn't visually present in the core photos, and how the past few months had opened an opportunity they didn't want to waste. He didn't know what that meant, but I did. It connected perfectly with the photo I had seen, with the softness in my husband's eyes around his ex-wife lately, with every unexplained late-night phone call he claimed was about planning. I returned home alone, locking the door behind me as if sealing myself into a courtroom where I was both witness and judge. I didn't go looking for evidence. I simply opened his study drawer where he often forgot to hide things properly. There they were. Messages between him and his ex-wife buried in an old folder, not romantic but undeniably intimate, the kind of emotional closeness that should have belonged to me. Sharing personal worries, compliments on how she looked during planning meetings, conversations about missing the old times, and messages where he confided frustrations about me, as if I were an obstacle instead of a partner. I didn't break down. Not then. I simply sat at the edge of the bed and began to gather everything calmly. Screenshots, photos, timestamps. Not to expose them in rage, but to protect my own truth from being rewritten later. Pain no longer felt like something that controlled me. It felt like something I could finally confront. When I finished, I wrote a letter to my stepson. I didn't blame anyone directly. I didn't mention the affair. I told him only what he deserved to know. Why I had walked out, how deeply I had cared for him, and how proud I was of the man he had become. I folded it carefully, leaving it on my bedside table, ready for the morning. As I lay there in the dim room, one thought repeated itself steadily, quietly. If they didn't want me in their celebration, they would have to face me in the truth. The next day would not be about revenge. It would be about reclaiming the dignity they had so casually stripped from me. And I was ready. Morning light filtered into the room long before I was ready to move, but I got up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. Every step felt steady, as if the weight I had been carrying had shifted from my shoulders to my hands, something I could now place down instead of struggling to hold. The wedding brunch was scheduled at the groom's house, an informal gathering meant to smooth out the previous day's exhaustion. I knew everyone would be there. I also knew it was time for truths to stop living in shadows. When I arrived, people stared as if I were an unexpected storm cloud drifting into a sunny morning. My husband was the first to see me. His surprise was unfiltered, a mix of confusion and annoyance he failed to hide quickly enough. The bride's family fell silent. Some whispered. Some avoided looking at me altogether. Only my stepson reacted with pure sincerity. He rushed to me immediately, hugging me without hesitation, asking why I had disappeared and why he never saw me inside the ceremony. His voice held concern, not accusation. That alone gave me the strength to continue. I told him we would talk. But first there were things everyone needed to hear, clearly and without distortion. My husband tried to intervene, insisting the moment wasn't appropriate, but the groom stopped him firmly. He said I had the right to speak. That single sentence shifted the room's balance. Eyes turned to me, not with warmth, but with attention they had denied me the day before. I began calmly. I explained how I had been seated in the hallway, not due to limited space but because someone decided my presence disrupted the image they wanted to present. A ripple of shock spread across the room. People began murmuring among themselves. The bride's aunt attempted to interject, calling it a misunderstanding, but I held up the photo of the hallway chair sent by the venue staff member. The room quieted instantly. Then I spoke about the conversation overheard, the decision to exclude me, the deliberate effort to make me invisible. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse anyone by name. I simply laid out what had happened. My husband's face tightened, not with guilt but with fear that the truth was finally visible. Before he could speak, the young woman from the venue stepped through the doorway. I had asked her to come if she felt comfortable. She confirmed everything she had seen and heard, her voice steady despite the crowd. She explained how the seating arrangement had been altered at the last minute, and how my husband had been present when the decision was made. A collective gasp followed. My stepson looked between us, hurt filling his eyes as he processed the betrayal. Only then did I reveal the emotional infidelity, not with dramatic flair but with quiet honesty. I didn't describe feelings or speculate. I simply showed the messages, the photos, the conversations documented in my husband's own words. The room fell silent again, this time heavier, real, undeniable. My husband tried to explain, stumbling over excuses about shared history, nostalgia, misunderstanding. But every sentence only exposed the truth more clearly. He had chosen to protect someone else's comfort at the cost of mine. I turned to my stepson, telling him he was not responsible for any of this, and that my love and pride for him were unchanged. He hugged me again, tears in his eyes, apologizing for something that was never his fault. When I announced calmly that I would be filing for divorce, my husband's denial cracked into desperation. He reached for my arm, begging to discuss it privately, but I stepped back. The boundary had been crossed long before I ever walked out of the wedding hall. I thanked the guests who listened, wished the newlyweds happiness, and stepped outside. My stepson followed me to the driveway, stopping me before I entered my car. He told me that family isn't defined by blood or marriage papers, but by the people who stand by you when others choose convenience over respect. His words broke something inside me. This time not in pain but in release. As I drove away, my phone buzzed one last time. A message from the venue staff woman. You stood up for yourself today. Don't lose that strength. I didn't reply, but for the first time in a long time I felt free. The life I thought I needed had ended, but the dignity I rediscovered would carry me into a new beginning I finally felt brave enough to face.